heard of the quintessential Australian stories and folklore. We've decided to share some of the lesser known tales. These are the kind of tales that interest us. And if you're interested in the history of Australia, the more obscure stories about places and people you may not have heard of, then stay tuned and enjoy this new series, Aussie Tales That You Weren't Taught. In this episode, we look into the Australian Prime Minister who dabbled in the occult. Now, you may have been taught about Alfred Deakin, namesake of Deakin University and the second Prime Minister of Australia. He was in office 3 terms from 1903 to 1910 for the Perfectionist Party, which eventually became the Liberal Party. How, you ask, did a Prime Minister become involved in such a thing as the occult? Well, let's start from Alfred's beginnings. Alfred Deakin was born in August of 1856 to middle-class British immigrant parents Sarah Bill and William Deakin, who had arrived into South Australia first and then into Melbourne following the gold rush in 1850. At the time of Alfred's birth, the family, including older sister Catherine, were living in a cottage at around 90 George Street, Fitzroy. Father William Deakin, then a carrier for Cobb & Co, before creating his own firm, Hill and Deakin Cab Proprietors. Alfred was a clever boy who developed an early love of reading, attending boarding school initially as the only boy in a girls' school. He then went on to Melbourne Grammar School. He was very interested in spirituality at a young age. At 16, he believed he had hypnotic powers and could control others using mental commands. Nice mutant powers. With an average academic grade, he matriculated to University of Melbourne at age 15, where he studied to become a barrister. In those days, it did not require as high an academic result, and Alfred was admitted to the bar at 21 without even graduating from university. After an unsuccessful year, he left the bar, and meeting David Syme, proprietor of The Age, Alfred settled as editor for him on politics and literature, which he did on and off throughout his life, sometimes anonymously. But back to his dabbling. In Alfred's late teens, he was prominent in the spiritualist movement, attending seances, testing phenomena, arranging lectures, and conducting the Melbourne Progressive Lyceum. As teacher at the Spiritualist Sunday School, and met his future wife Patty Brown when she was only 11. He got to know her over many years, even dancing with her at her 16th birthday, but waited until she was 18 before he proposed. Paddy was born the January of 1863 in Melbourne to parents Elizabeth Turner and Hugh Junior Brown, owner of the Australian Distillery Works. Her father Hugh, son of Reverend Archibald Brown of the Church of Scotland, after arriving in Australia, the search of gold himself, was influenced by the growing uncertainty in reconciling religion and science, particularly in relation to immortality during the 1860s. A work on spiritualism lent to him by a friend impressed him strongly, though not immediately persuaded. He studied the subject carefully and went to lectures of the Association of Progressive Spiritualists, founded in 1870. Modern spiritualism came to the Australian goldfields in Victoria throughout the 1860s through British and American mediums. Much like Alfred Deakin, Hugh attended lectures at the Victorian Association of Progressive Spiritualists, which evolved and was one of the first spiritualist churches established in the world in 1870. It was founded by William Terry, a prominent bookshop and health store owner based on Collins Street, Melbourne. Terry was a highly regarded healer, admired by both his clients and many in the medical profession who frequently sought his expertise. He also served as the editor of the Harbinger of Light. Louisa Lawson too, featured last week, was part of the Sydney chapter of the Progressive Spiritualist Lyceum, joining in the 1880s. But Hugh Brown in 1874 participated in a séance led by American medium Charles H. Foster. During this séance, he believed he made contact with his dead father. This encounter profoundly influenced him, leading to his complete embrace of spiritualism and the abandonment of his previous faith. He went on to establish a séance circle at their home, influencing the young Patty, who herself often served as the medium. She also practiced automatic writing. Her remarkable abilities as a medium were documented in two of her father's publications released in 1876 and 1888, as well as in Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death in 1903. Patty began automatic writing at the age of 11 and had many different spirits come through her and talk to the family, as well as others who witnessed it. They very much believed Patty was talking to the dead because there was things that she was writing down she could not have known, languages she could not have known, and people she did not know at such a young age. Sometime later, Patty and Alfred were interviewed by the writer, Frederick Myers. Her story and that of her father's was very interesting to him that he included it in his own book. Alfred Deakin became involved in these seances early on, welcoming many of their elitist friends. Deeply introspective, Deakin possessed an intense religious faith and sought spiritual transformation through mystical insights into the nature of God. He explored world religions, philosophy and science in his quest to understand the unity of all life and the wisdom of the universe. Writing about yoga and karma, he delved into mysticism and the occult, reflecting the interests of many from his era and background. He attended seances, channeled messages from mediums, and in 1877 became president of the Victorian Association of Spiritualists. For a brief period, he was also a member of the Theosophical Society. Deakin's ability to transcend his corporeal self, coupled with his intense self-reflection, shaped his unique outlook. Though a qualified barrister, his passion for reading and writing, evident from his teenage years when he began composing poetry and plays, drew him into a career in journalism, a pursuit he maintained even during his time as a Prime Minister. Alfred and Patty had extraordinary lives. It was never a dull moment for the Deakins. From seances with friends, to Alfred going to Britain and having it out with the Prime Minister, to Patty not getting along so well with Alfred's sister. It's almost enough for what could have been at the time the Jerry Springer Show. But there was also some troubling time. Two of Patty's brothers would eventually require a séance to locate them after a yacht that they were on capsized and they both perished. Alfred was a likeable guy, well-read, and due to his involvement in the Age paper, travelled as part of a delegation to the Imperial Conference, where he boldly argued with Lord Salisbury, the Prime Minister of Britain. Salisbury was taken aback by his audacity, but Deakin was offered a knighthood, which he astounded the British upper class by refusing. He stated that he would only accept an honour bestowed by his native land, Australia, and not one granted by Britain. This demonstrated his dual identity as both a loyal imperialist and a proud Australian nationalist. This moment catapulted him into celebrity status, and he was hailed as a representative of the best that Australian colonists had to offer. Native-born, well-educated, handsome and confident, he embodied the ideals of the time. Alfred Deakin served in various roles in the Victorian government, including Minister for Public Works and Water Supply, Chief Secretary and Solicitor General. He also led the Liberal Party from 1886. By the 1890s, the concept of a representative Australian identity had begun to shift towards the countryside, the Australian legend and the rugged larrikin masculinity that characterised the era. When the ministry fell in 1893, he returned to the bar to support his family. However, after representing Frederick Deeming in 1892, thought to have been Jack the Ripper at the time, and losing this case in the court, it soured him a little. In 1903, he became Australia's second Prime Minister.
We are the trustees for posterity, for the unborn millions, unknown and unnumbered, whose aspirations we may help them to fulfill, and whose destinies we may assist to determine.
It was during his second term, however, as Prime Minister, his demanding work and responsibilities began to take a toll on his health, and his memory began to fail. Deakin retired from parliamentary life in January of 1913 with his health broken and his once magnificent memory virtually non-existent. Tragically, he was fully aware of his decline, and he wrote of his concern in his private journals. His retirement was meant to be full of books and writing, but he was now unable to remember what he had read the previous day. Deakin wrote a poem for Patty every wedding anniversary and every birthday. She nursed him devotedly in his final sad years until his death on the 7th of October 1919, at the age of 63. Alfred and Patty had 3 daughters, Ivy, Stella and Vera. In his later life, Alfred had rejected ever being a medium. Possibly going into politics, he wanted them to see him as someone with core Christian values that most of the people had at the time. However, Patty and her parents continued their long association with spiritualism to their deaths. Well, what an interesting story. A Prime Minister, maybe not in the seance as a Prime Minister, but he was involved in it heavily before he became a Prime Minister, and then quickly keeping it hush-hush before he got into the government. These days with the internet and social media, it's hard to keep things buried long after people have died. Sometimes the secrets surface, and it is well documented about Alfred Deakin. So, he definitely dabbled. Alfred Deakin has been commemorated with a suburb of his very own in the ACT, as well as a sculpture of his head in the town and another sculpture in the town he lived in, Ballarat, as well as the university named after him we previously mentioned. If you like this story, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell, because we'll have many more Aussie tales you haven't been taught.